Sorry, that's what I'm just gonna hit continue. All right. So yeah, I'm Jamie Walker, registered dietitian. I work in Menor at the Integrative Medicine Department at Brunner Sandin Dietrich Wellness Center. All right, so let's get started. So sugar is delicious, right? But it's very easy to overeat. Just some sugar facts here. The average person consumes about 17 teaspoons of sugar a day. And it's quite amazing. This adds up to about 57 pounds of added sugar a year. And the problem with sugar is it has no nutritional value. It's really only a source of empty calories and sweetness. So it's delicious, obviously, in many of our treat foods. But unfortunately, the more we eat, the more we often crave it. So sugar can kind of feel like a vicious cycle of cravings when we eat and drink a lot of items that have added sugar. And unfortunately, Fortunately, there are, if we're eating heavily processed foods like chips, pretzels, cookies, crackers, this can actually increase inflammation in our body. And over time, if we are eating these foods in excess, this can increase our risk of health problems. It can increase our risk of heart disease, of course, diabetes, prediabetes, liver disease, and even cancer. And then added sugar in our diet can also contribute to high triglycerides. So if you've ever had high triglycerides pop up on lab work, then sugar is something you can actually decrease to see that number go down. And you hear a lot about fat storage and insulin. So what happens is when we eat a lot of excess added sugar, this increases the level of insulin in our body, and that in turn increases fat to be stored more readily. So when you think about this as a whole, it's not something we want to be scared of, but it's something we need to be aware of. If we're eating a lot of excess sugar, over time, it can be detrimental to our health. And just some general recommendations, you can see the American Heart Association recommends added sugar to really be a very small part of our diet. So for women, we want to have no more than 6 teaspoons a day, which is about 25 grams of sugar. And for men, we want to limit to about 9 teaspoons, which is about 38 grams of sugar. So we want it to be about 10% of our total calories. We want the excess sugar to be a very small amount of our diet. We want to kind of look at the big picture, and we want most of our food to come from fruits, vegetables, whole foods, complex carbohydrates, which is like whole wheat and oatmeal, beans. We want to get nuts and seeds, lean protein, low fat dairy if you consume it. We want most of our diet to be those types of foods. And then, of course, there's always some room for some treats. So it's hard to distinguish what sugar is. When we say sugar, we often think, of course, pop candy cookies, but there's different types of sugar. There's naturally occurring sugar. So our fructose, which is mostly found in fruit, and we actually have in milk and dairy products, we have naturally occurring sugar as well. This is the type of sugar that we want to get mostly. We want to get our sugar from fruit, from low fat dairy products. These are okay. The stuff that we want to decrease in our diet is the added sugar. This is the stuff that's detrimental to our health. So added sugar is found in a lot of different things. Of course, in pop, candy, cakes, brownies, anything in the bakery aisle, unfortunately, cookies, pies, our juices, our sports drinks, dairy products like our sweet treats like ice cream and sweetened yogurt, chocolate milk, certain grain products, even like cereals and breads, can have added sugar in them as well. And 1 teaspoon of sugar actually equals 4 grams of sugar. So when you're reading nutrition labels, keep that in mind as well. I often get asked about juice versus fruit. We always want to eat real whole fruit whenever possible. Reason being is you get concentrated sugar in our juice. And juice is fine in moderation, but if we're having multiple cups of juice a day, it can add up very quickly. And you can see how they differ. There's a little more sugar in our juice and a little less in our real orange. But you think, well, both have natural sugar, correct? Yes, usually. It's just the juice is a little more concentrated and it's easier to drink a lot of juice than it is to eat a lot of oranges. And that's because you have a lot of fiber in the fruit. When we drink juice, all that fiber is removed. So when we think about our blood sugar, we want our blood sugar to be even, right? We don't want those rapid spikes because when we eat or drink something high in sugar, our blood sugar goes up, and then afterwards, we can often crash. That's what can happen to some of us when we eat candy, when we drink juice, when we eat ice cream, things like that. But when we eat fruit, whole foods, we have that fiber, and that keeps our blood sugar more even. So there can be a big difference between our real fruit and our juices. So we want to try to choose real whole foods and fruits as much as possible. So as you may know, sugar hides in a lot of different items. And that doesn't mean we can't eat these all together. It's just important to be aware where added sugar can be found. So our flavored oatmeals, like our brown sugar cinnamon, for example, strawberries and cream, all those different flavored oatmeals. The whole cereal aisle has a lot of added sugar in it. Granola has added sugar. Of course, our baked treats like our cakes, cookies, pastries, brownies. Even in bread, we often find high fructose corn syrup, which is a sugar in bread. You may find molasses or honey in bread items as well. These are also added sugar sources. Even sauces and condiments we may not realize, especially barbecue sauce and ketchup. There's always added sugar in these as well. Our yogurts, our frozen desserts, dried fruit, canned fruit will have added sugar from the juice in it. Frozen foods, frozen treats, granola bars, any sort of protein bar, breakfast bar, we always want to be aware of any added sugar in those as well. And of course, our beverages, our energy drinks, our fancy coffee drinks, and our juices will all have added sugar in them. So it's important to read the nutrition label. And when you see the front of the package on an item, you might see terms like sugar free. Sugar free means there's less than zero point 0.5 grams of sugar per serving. If you see claims for reduced sugar or less sugar, that means that there's at least 25% less sugar per serving compared to the standard item that has full sugar of that variety. If you see the term no added sugar or without added sugars, this just means there's no actual sugar or sugar containing items such as juice or dried fruit added during the processing. So you might see some of these terms on the front of the label, and you might see some of these names on the ingredients list. And this is where it gets kind of tricky. Of course, we know sugar is just sugar, right? But then there's a lot of different names that are also considered sugar, and our body treats them just like they do, just like we would regular sugar. So when you see brown rice syrup, high fructose corn syrup, coconut sugar, beet sugar, evaporated cane juice, honey, maple syrup, raw sugar, invert sugar, palm sugar, the list goes on. Even names ending in ose, OSE, dextrose, fructose, sucrose, those are all names for added sugar. So when you're looking at an ingredients list and you have an ingredients list this long with a lot of different ingredients in it, and you might see brown rice syrup, you might see maple syrup, you might see fructose, you'll know they've added sugar in 3 different types of ingredients. So it's always important to check the ingredients list as well. And when it comes to reading labels, it's important to look at that total sugar, but also now we have on our new label, we have added sugars. This is really nice to see because that added sugar on the nutrition label is just pure sugar that they've added to that product. I always like to look at the serving size too, because if we're eating 2 servings out of this container, then we have to think, well, I'm eating not 10 grams of added sugar, I'm eating 20 if I'm eating 2 different servings. So it all depends on how much we're eating of a product too. So always look at the serving size and then look and see how much added sugar is in a product. So, for example, say you're shopping for a granola bar. Most of our items that are sweet are going to have some sort of added sugar in them, and that's okay, but we want to choose wisely. So if you're in the granola bar aisle, you want to look at that total sugar or the added sugars and just find the product or the item that has the lowest number. You might see one that's 15 or 18. You might see another brand that's 7 or 8. Go with the one that's 7 or 8, and that saves you a lot of excess sugar. And there's even marketing claims that can kind of trick us too. I apologize, this picture is a little hard to see, but it's just a yogurt label. And on the front of the yogurt, marketing is telling us it's a low fat yogurt. So in our minds, we think, oh, great, it's low fat, it's got to be healthy. And the thing is, they're not telling us that it's really high in sugar. And you see they add sugar to it on the actual ingredients list. And we have 26 grams of sugar in this little container of yogurt. So if you decide, well, I think that sounds a little high, and it is, you can look at other containers of yogurt and find one that's closer to maybe 8, 9, 10, and that's a much better option. So you can see why it's really important to, of course, when we look at the front of the package, we're going to see marketing, we're going to see claims to reel us in, but it's really important to turn it over and see what's actually in it to make a smart decision. So you can see how things are a lot different for a plain yogurt or compared to a sweetened yogurt. So our plain yogurt has very minimal ingredients. They're not adding any added sugar to this, but our fruit yogurt that's sweetened has high fructose corn syrup in it. And it also has apples and other things. And like I mentioned before, milk products have a naturally occurring sugar in them, and that's fine. But when they're adding high fructose corn syrup on top of it, we can really, it can really add up when it comes to sugar. So it gives you an idea how some of these really can vary. So if you are looking to reduce sugar, you could buy plain yogurt, plain Greek yogurt, for example, and add some fruit to it, add some cinnamon, and you've instantly got a healthier option. Sugar alcohols, you may have heard of these. These are interesting to talk about because sugar alcohols are sometimes sugar-free or very low in sugar. They contain very few calories. They're nice because they enable us to eat a lot of these sweet foods with a lot less calories. You'll find these in gum, mints, protein bars, some of our diet foods, sugar-free foods, reduced sugar products. And you'll see them named sorbitol, mannitol, xylitol, erythritol. If you see any of those are sugar alcohols. They're not harmful. They're perfectly fine. Like I said, they enable us to enjoy a lot of sweeter products with much less calories, less grams of sugar. However, if you have a sensitive stomach, for some people, larger amounts of these sugar alcohols can cause some GI distress, bloating, diarrhea. So be very careful and just see how you feel and read labels if they're unsure. But in normal amounts, most people tolerate them just fine. But you will start to see them in a lot of diet foods and a lot of sugar-free items because they're sweet, but they're low in calories. Sugar substitutes are a hot topic. I get a lot of questions on these. Our artificial sweeteners, they raise a lot of skepticism because research, unfortunately, is kind of inconclusive. We have a lot of studies that are inconsistent because it's hard to do research on humans. So a lot of these research studies are done on animals. And the good thing is artificial sweeteners are deemed as generally recognized as safe in moderate amounts. And they don't make up a big portion of our diet. The biggest concern is there is no evidence long-term if they actually help with our blood sugar and our health long term. And of course, we use sugar substitutes to replace our high sugar items with sugar free items. And this is a great thing short term, but long term, it doesn't take away our craving for these sweet foods. For example, if we are loving soda, but we want to switch to diet soda, we are still used to that heightened sweetness, and our taste buds are still used to that hyper sweetness. So it can be difficult to do that replacement because they find long term research shows that that doesn't really help with our waistlines. So sugar-free items, I think, are fine in moderation, but we want to be careful not to use sugar substitutes in all different parts of our meals and snacks. We don't want to go crazy with them. So you're probably wondering, do I need to quit sugar? We hear a lot about quitting sugar or going on a sugar detox, eliminating sugar. You don't have to quit it completely in order to be healthy. We can still have these sweet treats. We want to really kind of break away from that all or nothing mentality because when we tell ourselves, okay, I have to eliminate sugar, I've got to get it out of my diet. Unfortunately, this is very unrealistic and often sets people up for failure because when we tell ourselves, I can't have chocolate cake, I can't have ice cream, we often feel too restricted and then we want it more. So instead, we want to look at the big picture. We don't have to quit sugar completely, but we want to look at our overall diet. We're all different. We all eat different things daily. We all struggle with different things. So we want to look at what our norm is. How many foods am I eating daily that contain added sugar? And then once we're aware of what we're eating daily that has sugar in it, we want to cut back on those high sugar items and choose healthier substitutes. This is the best way to do it to achieve that healthiest version of yourself. So let's go through some tips for reducing sugar intake. Because, like I said, we don't have to quit it altogether, but we don't want to have sugar in excess, right? We just want to start to reduce it. So I think start with the most obvious. Think about what you drink every day. Do you go and get a coffee drink from Starbucks or Dunkin'? Does it contain sugar? If you're not sure, you can go on their website and look at their nutrition content. Do we drink pop? Do we drink juice? Do we drink any sodas, any sort of Gatorades or anything like that? Any liquid that contains sugar, think about what you do every single day. We want to choose unsweetened versions of the food we normally eat. So if we eat yogurt or oatmeal that has a lot of sugar in it, we want to switch to a lower sugar option. We want to naturally sweeten our oatmeal with fresh fruit and cinnamon. We want to get used to those flavors instead of the really sweet flavors. This can often take time too. So some of us need to gradually wean off of sugar, and that is absolutely fine. For example, if you love sweet tea and want to shift to unsweet tea, this can be shocking at first. So we want to go halvesies, right? You can do half and half, half sweet tea, half unsweet tea. Get used to that for a while, and then gradually you go down to the unsweet tea. This is a great approach rather than ripping the Band-Aid and saying, I've got to get rid of it altogether. Long-term changes so that they stick forever. If you're a baker and you love baking, you can use a lot of different items in place of regular sugar, mashed bananas, prunes even, dates, apples, or sweet potatoes. A lot of recipes, you can just simply use less sugar. I try this a lot with muffin recipes. I love making muffins. Whatever the sugar that they call for, I just use less of it and it always comes out great. So play around with some of your favorite recipes and just try using less sugar or fruit in place of that. And then if we're using more minimally processed foods, that's going to help out a lot as well. If we're eating foods that don't have a long list of ingredients, that's going to help as well for reducing sugar content. So say you're shopping for peanut butter, try to get our natural peanut butter rather than regular peanut butter and read the ingredients list. If you can, try to find a peanut butter or nut butter that has salt and nuts and nothing else. We want to try to avoid items that have sugar listed in the top 3 ingredients as well. So look for minimal ingredients on the list. That's going to help to cut back on sugar as well. We can also try preparing some of our own things at home. When you are making things at home, that gives us a lot more control over what goes into it, right? And then we can take out some of the sugar ourselves. We can make our own salad dressing with oil and vinegar, or we can ask for oil and vinegar when we're eating out if we're unsure. We can choose unsweet tea and add lemon, add mint, get creative with flavors, with natural flavors. If you're not a big water drinker, but you need to drink more water, then we can try fruit infused water or sparkling water that doesn't contain any sweetness. We can put lemon, lime, berries, mint, cucumber, basil in our water to give it flavor more naturally. We can also try sparkling water with a little bit of a couple splashes of 100% juice. That tastes really good. And we want to look at our food labels, like I mentioned before. When we're looking at items in the grocery store and we know that there's a little bit of sugar in it, choose items with the lowest amount of added sugar. And choose sauces and condiments wisely. Look for things that have no sugar added. And of course, fresh fruit. If we're looking for a sweet treat, you can't go wrong with fresh fruit. That's one of the best ways to reduce our sugar intake is to switch to more of eating the rainbow and eating fruit in place of sweet treats. So oatmeal, we want to start with plain oatmeal rather than our sweetened oatmeals. Serve it with fresh fruit, berries, chopped up apple or bananas. Cinnamon gives a lot of flavor. Nut butters are delicious in oatmeal. We can also try to add some unsweetened coconut. So there's a lot of different ways to make these foods taste good. It just takes a little bit of outside of the box thinking. And be cautious of syrup used in coffee drinks. A lot of these fancy coffee drinks are delicious, like mochas and vanilla lattes. And they're so fun to go and get coffee, but we want to ask for less sugar. We want to check ingredients and menus and look at labels. You can even make your own teas and lattes and iced coffees at home. A lot of these coffee drinks, you can buy the coffee black and add your own sweetener if you want, like a little bit of stevia. And if you're using less, you're always going to make an improvement. We can also try to make a healthier version of ice cream. Ice cream is delicious in the summertime, right? But it does have a lot of added sugar. So we can try to make nice cream. Nice cream is made by just taking frozen fruit, you blend it up in your blender, like frozen bananas or berries, add a couple splashes of milk, blend it up just like you would ice cream, and you've got a nice frozen treat that's much healthier. We can also make our own sweet and salty popcorn. We can add dark chocolate. We can add nuts, unsweetened dried fruit. We can make our own trail mix. So you can see the common denominator is making a lot of these things at home if we can, because then we have an idea how much sugar is going. The other thing is to be mindful. And I know I talked about mindfulness in one of my other talks. So if you were tuning in for another one, this is kind of a similar situation because a lot of times we crave sugar when we are stressed or anxious or tired. You can ask yourself, all right, I'm craving sugar right now. I'm craving a brownie, but think about what's really going on. What's really causing that urge for a sweet treat at the moment? A lot of times we may not be hungry. We make a lot of decisions based on emotions. Check in with yourself at that moment and find out what's going on. Did you have a stressful day? Did you not get enough sleep the night before? Unfortunately, lack of sleep can make us crave more sugar, more carbohydrates. Find out when you ate last. Did you skip a meal? A lot of times when we're not eating on a consistent basis, we're going to crave more sweet treats because our blood sugar runs a little lower. So we want to eat more regularly. We don't want to skip meals because then we get hangry, right? And then we're looking for all sorts of treats. Sometimes it's just a habit. After dinner, we might just crave a sweet treat after dinner. So ask yourself, am I craving this just because it's my normal habit? Once you kind of figure out what's going on, then you can kind of divert your attention if needed or make a different decision. Just being more mindful and kind of slowing down when you're having a sweet craving gives you that couple of extra seconds to make a different decision. So, in conclusion, we want to just become aware. First of all, if you want to start shifting to a healthier, lower sugar lifestyle, first become aware of what you're having in your diet that has a lot of added sugar. Are we having sugar in our coffee? Are we having brown sugar in our oatmeal? Are we having um, trail mix with chocolate for a snack? Are we having a donut later? Are we having ice cream after our dinner time? Once you see that there's a pattern, then you can see what you need to make healthier substitutions on. So look at the big picture first and always be prepared, because if we're not prepared and hunger strikes, it's very hard to stay on track, right? So always keep healthy snacks on hand. Fresh fruit, always a great option. Make your own trail mix. You know that what goes into it. Make your own air popped popcorn. Have some yogurt, have some dark chocolate and almonds if you're looking for a healthier sweet treat. Make sure we get enough sleep. Make sure we're finding ways to manage stress. And if you have triggering foods that you find are really easy to overeat, keep them out of the house if this makes it easier for you. Because we all know if it's there, it's very hard to avoid sometimes, right? But we also don't want to deprive ourselves. It's okay to have occasional treats. You can kind of think in terms of 80-20. If 80% of my eating pattern is real whole foods, fruits, vegetables, lean protein, healthy fats, nuts, seeds, good healthy carbohydrates and whole grains, then 20% I can choose some sweet treats. That's perfectly fine. That's a great way to tackle this. And I always like to remind people it's really about consistency. These habits should be consistent. It's not about being perfect. We don't have to be 100% sugar free, and we don't have to be perfect in order to be healthy. So, hopefully, this helps a little bit. And I think we can go on to questions next.
I kind of have a question. Of all like sugar alternatives, which is the best one?
Yeah.
Putting in your coffee.
If you're going to do like more of a sugar-free option, I like stevia or monk fruit. Those are pretty good. When you think about honey and agave, those are often used as a replacement for sugar, and they're fine options too. But we want to remember agave syrup, maple syrup, honey. Our body treats them the same way as they would regular white sugar. So they're fine in moderation as well. If you like a little bit of honey in your coffee or in your tea, that's a great option too. We just want to be careful not to go overboard with big spoonfuls. So it all depends on what you're using, but honey is fine. Maple syrup is fine. We just want to be careful to treat them like we would regular sugar, use them in moderation. If we want more of a sugar-free option, like I said, I like the stevia or the monk fruit. Those are pretty good options.
So if you use stevia, there's no grams of sugar in that, so you're
Correct,
fine.
yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
I use it sometimes. Just a little bit in my coffee.
I was surprised that yogurt had 33 grams of sugar when you said a woman should have 25 a day.
Amazing.
So
yes.
if you have coffee, you're already
done. I know.
Yeah. Done.
I know we think yogurt is a healthy food, and it is, but that's where we have to be investigators, because you look at the yogurt aisle and there's so many yogurts and you think, okay, that looks pretty good. But then when you look at the back and you see how much they do vary, you could get a Chobani yogurt with 8 grams of sugar. You could get I think it's Yoplait whips, and they're like almost 30 grams of sugar. So yeah, they really do vary. So it can make a big difference in the choice that we make. It's shocking.
So one of the labels said it had 12 grams of sugar, and then it said 10 grams of added sugar.
Yep.
Of the 12, 10 of them was added to make it sweeter.
You got it. Yep. So that 2 grams of sugar that was kind of left over was naturally occurring in whatever was in there. And then the added sugar was just, dumped into the product, whether it was white sugar, high fructose corn syrup, purely just added sugar. So it's kind of nice how the labels are pointing that out now, because it's kind of eye-opening, because Yogurt, for example, like I said, has naturally occurring sugar that's going to be there regardless. But then we're adding sugar to it. So it's nice to kind of see how much purely added sugar is in things. So that's on the new label now.
Okay. That's interesting.
It is, yeah, it's kind of cool.
Any other questions?
Anything else? And if anybody has questions, that they don't want to ask or think of something later, write down my number and my email address. Please reach out anytime. And I also offer at my location nutrition counseling. And if you need nutrition counseling one-on-one at any point, just reach out and we can discuss that as well.
Thank you, Jamie. This was very interesting. I guess if there's no more questions, we can just end that.